The gunshot that shattered the afternoon silence in Dodge City, Kansas, in the summer of 1878, sent 22-year-old Sarah Mitchell stumbling into the dusty street, clutching her bleeding shoulder while her attacker's horse thundered away into the distance. She had been carrying the last of her father's money, $300 she had planned to use for passage to her aunt in San Francisco, but the masked rider had torn it from her hands before putting a bullet through her just for the principle of it. Now she lay in the dirt outside the general store, her cream-colored dress soaking through with crimson, watching the blue sky above her start to fade into gray at the edges as shocked townspeople gathered around her in a useless circle. Someone shouted for the doctor, but Sarah could feel the life draining out of her with each heartbeat, could taste the copper of blood in her mouth where she had bitten her tongue in the fall. Her vision swam, faces blurring together into meaningless shapes, and she thought distantly that this was a terrible way to die, alone in a strange town where nobody even knew her name. Then strong hands lifted her from the ground, and she found herself looking up into the most striking pair of green eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a worn leather hat. "I have got you," a deep voice said, calm and steady despite the chaos around them. "Stay with me now." Sarah tried to speak, to tell him it was no use, but darkness pulled her under before the words could form. When consciousness returned, she was lying on a narrow bed in a small, clean room that smelled of soap and leather. Pain radiated from her shoulder in hot waves, but when she lifted her hand to touch it, she found it bandaged professionally. Sunlight streamed through a single window, and she could hear the sounds of the street outside, the rumble of wagon wheels and the distant lowing of cattle. "You are awake." The voice came from the corner of the room, and Sarah turned her head carefully to see the man from the street sitting in a straight-back chair, his hat resting on his knee. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and those remarkable green eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, denim pants, and a faded blue shirt, with a gun belt hanging on the bedpost nearby. "Where am I?" Sarah's voice came out as a raspy whisper. "My room at the boarding house," he said, rising and crossing to pour water from a pitcher into a tin cup. He brought it to her, helping her sit up enough to drink without choking. "The doctor said you were lucky. The bullet went clean through, missed anything vital. You will heal, but it will take time." Sarah drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. When she finished, she met his eyes directly. "You saved my life. I do not even know your name." "Cole Harrison," he said, taking the cup and setting it on the small table beside the bed. "And you are Sarah Mitchell. I found your papers in your bag." He gestured to her carpet bag sitting on the floor by the wardrobe. "From what I gather, you had just arrived in town when you were robbed." $300, Sarah said bitterly, closing her eyes against the sting of tears. "Everything I had in the world. My father died 3 months ago back in Missouri. There was nothing left after we paid his debts except that money. My aunt wrote to say I could live with her in California, help her with her boarding house. I thought I could start over." "And now?" Cole asked quietly. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him. This stranger who had carried her bleeding body off the street and paid for a doctor and given up his own bed for her recovery. "Now I have nothing," she said. "No money for the stagecoach. No way to pay you back for what you have already spent on me. I cannot even afford to bury myself if this wound turns septic." "The wound will not turn septic if you follow the doctor's order," Cole said firmly, "and I never asked you to pay me back." "But I owe you my life," Sarah protested, struggling to sit up further despite the pain. "You cannot just expect nothing in return. That is not how the world works." Cole reached out and gently pushed her back against the pillows, his touch surprisingly careful for such large, work-roughened hands. "Rest now," he said. "We can talk about the world and how it works when you are stronger." Over the next 3 days, Sarah learned that Cole Harrison was a man of few words but considerable action. He brought her meals from the boarding house kitchen, changed her bandages with a competence that suggested he had tended wounds before, and sat reading by lamplight in the evenings while she drifted in and out of fevered sleep. He never complained about sleeping on the floor, never suggested she should be moved to charity lodgings, never once made her feel like a burden despite the obvious inconvenience her presence caused. On the fourth day, Sarah woke feeling clearer-headed than she had since the shooting. The pain in her shoulder had dulled to a persistent ache, and she could move her arms slightly without wanting to scream. Cole was not in the room, but she could hear activity in the street below, the morning sounds of a cattle town coming to life. She managed to sit up and swing her legs over the edge of the bed, though the effort left her dizzy and gasping. "What do you think you are doing?" Cole's voice came from the doorway, sharp with concern. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and steadied her with a hand on her good shoulder. "The doctor said you need to stay in bed for at least another week." "I have been in your bed for 4 days," Sarah said, looking up at him with determination in her blue eyes. "You have done more than enough for me, more than anyone has a right to expect. I need to figure out what I'm going to do next, and I cannot do that lying down like an invalid." Cole studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to some decision. He pulled the chair close and sat down so they were at eye level. "I have been thinking about your situation," he said carefully, "and I might have a solution if you're willing to hear it." "I am listening," Sarah said, though her heart sank at what he might propose. She had heard stories of men who helped desperate women only to demand favors no decent woman would give. But Cole's next words surprised her completely. "I work for the Double R Ranch, about 15 miles north of here," he said. "It is a good outfit, run by a fair man named Robert Rutherford. His wife passed 2 years ago, and his daughter Emma has been trying to manage the household and help with the ranch books, but she is overwhelmed. They need someone who can cook, keep house, maybe help with the ledgers if you have any schooling in that direction. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board." Sarah stared at him. "You are offering me a job?" "I am telling you about a job that needs doing," Cole corrected. "Whether you take it is your choice, but it would give you a way to support yourself while you heal, maybe save up enough to continue to California if that is still what you want, or maybe you will decide you like Kansas." He paused, a faint smile touching his lips. "We are not as wild as people say." "I grew up on a farm," Sarah said slowly, her mind racing. "I can cook and clean and keep accounts. My father taught me to read and write and figure, said it was important even for a daughter. But why would you do this for me? You do not know anything about me?" Cole's green eyes met hers with steady honesty. "I know you got shot and robbed and lost everything, and you did not cry or complain or ask anyone to fix it for you," he said. "I know you tried to get up and face your troubles, even though you could barely stand. That tells me what kind of person you are. The rest we can figure out as we go." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I cannot pay you back for what you have done," she whispered, emotion making her voice rough. "The doctor, this room, the food, everything. It will take me months to save enough." Cole reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "I never asked you to," he said quietly. "Just stay with me. Come out to the ranch. Give it a chance. That is all I ask." The way he said it, with such simple sincerity, made something warm unfold in Sarah's chest despite all her pain and loss. She looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, scarred and strong from years of hard work. Then she looked back up at his face, at the kindness in those remarkable eyes, and made her decision. "All right," she said. "I will stay." 2 weeks later, Sarah sat beside Cole on the bench seat of a borrowed wagon, her carpet bag and a few supplies in the back, heading north toward the Double R Ranch. The Kansas prairie stretched out around them in rolling waves of grass, golden in the late summer heat, with scattered herds of cattle grazing in the distance. The sky overhead was a dome of brilliant blue, so vast it made Sarah feel tiny and infinite at the same time. Cole handled the horses with easy competence, his hands light on the reins. He had been patient during her recovery, bringing her meals and checking her bandages, but giving her space to heal and think. They had talked some in the evenings, careful conversations about small things, books they had read, and places they had been. Sarah learned that Cole had been working cattle since he was 16, that he had come west from Tennessee after the war took his father and brother, that he saved his money and someday hoped to have a small spread of his own. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her mother who died when she was 12, and her father who had struggled to keep the farm going alone, about how his death had felt like the final severing of her ties to everything familiar, leaving her adrift in a world that suddenly seemed too big and too hard. Cole listened without judgment, his quiet presence somehow making the telling easier. Now, watching the prairie roll past, Sarah felt simultaneously terrified and oddly hopeful about what lay ahead. Her shoulder still ached, and her arm remained weak, but the wound was healing cleanly. More than that, something about Cole's steady confidence made her believe she could do this, could start over in this strange place, and make something of herself again. "Tell me about the Rutherfords," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What should I know before we arrive?" Cole considered the question while guiding the horses around a particularly rocky section of the trail. "Robert is in his early 50s, been ranching since before Kansas was even a state," he said. "He is tough but fair, expects an honest day's work but treats his people right. His daughter Emma is 19, sweet-natured but tired from trying to do too much. His son Jack is 23, works the ranch alongside the rest of us. Good man, quick to laugh." "How many hands does the ranch employ?" Sarah asked. "6 of us full-time, plus seasonal help during roundup and drives," Cole said. "Most of the boys are decent enough, though you will want to watch out for Pete Donovan. He is not bad, just rough around the edges and forward with women. Do not let him push you around." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. She had little experience with rough men beyond her father's occasional farm helpers. "And you?" she asked before she could stop herself. "What should I watch out for with you?" Cole glanced at her, surprise and something else flickering across his face. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious expression. "I suppose you should watch out for my tendency to bring home strays," he said. "Apparently I cannot resist helping lost causes." "Am I a lost cause?" Sarah asked, oddly stung by the description despite its accuracy. The smile faded, and Cole's voice turned serious. "No," he said firmly. "You are someone who got dealt a bad hand through no fault of your own. There is a difference." He paused, then added more quietly, "And for what it is worth, I'm glad I found you that day. Glad you are here." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at the words, a feeling that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "I am glad too," she admitted softly. The Double R Ranch came into view an hour later, sprawling across a broad valley with good water and shelter from the wind. The main house was a solid structure of hewn logs with a covered porch, flanked by a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed across the surrounding pastures in small groups, sleek and healthy-looking. As they drove up the main road, Sarah could see men working near the barn, the sound of a hammer ringing clear across the distance. A man emerged from the house as Cole pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the porch. He was tall and rangy, his hair more gray than brown, with the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. His eyes were sharp as they assessed Sarah, but not unkind. "This must be the young woman you told me about," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Welcome to the Double R, Miss Mitchell. I am Robert Rutherford." Cole jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Sarah descend, his hands careful on her waist as he lifted her down. She felt the strength in him, the easy way he bore her weight, and had to remind herself to breathe normally once her feet touched solid ground. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Rutherford," Sarah said, extending her hand. "I promise you will not regret it." Robert's handshake was firm but brief. "Cole speaks highly of you, and that is recommendation enough for me," he said. My daughter is inside preparing the guest room. She is eager to meet you. He turned to Cole. The boys are having trouble with that new Mustang in the North Corral. Think you can sort him out? I will take a look, Cole said, but his eyes remained on Sarah. Will you be all right? I'm fine, Sarah assured him, touched by his concern. Go do your work. I can manage meeting Emma Rutherford on my own. Cole hesitated another moment, then nodded and headed toward the barn, his long stride eating up the distance. Sarah watched him go, feeling oddly bereft at his departure despite the kindness in Robert Rutherford's weathered face. He is a good man, Robert said quietly, following her gaze. Best hand I have ever had. Steady in a crisis, gentle with the animals, honest to his bones. I would trust him with anything I own, including my family. He looked at Sarah directly. That is why, when he asked me to give you a chance, I did not hesitate. Sarah felt heat creep into her cheeks. I will do my best to prove worthy of that trust, she said. I believe you will, Robert said, then gestured toward the house. Come on inside, Emma has been cooking all morning in your honor. Emma Rutherford was a pretty girl, with her father's brown hair and warm hazel eyes, and her enthusiasm was immediate and genuine. She showed Sarah through the house, pointing out the kitchen with its large cast-iron stove, the parlor with its comfortable if worn furniture, and finally the small bedroom off the kitchen that would be Sarah's own space. It is not much, Emma said apologetically, gesturing at the narrow bed and simple washstand, but it has a good window for light and stays warm in winter from the kitchen stove. It is perfect, Sarah said honestly, thinking of the cramped quarters she had shared with her father in their last months, the constant worry about whether they could afford to keep even that roof over their heads. More than perfect. Thank you. Emma's face lit up with relief. I am so glad you are here, she said in a rush. I have been trying to keep everything running since Mama died, but it is so much. The cooking and cleaning and mending, plus Papa wants me to track the cattle sales and supply orders, and I'm just not good with numbers the way Mama was. I feel like I am failing everyone all the time. Sarah recognized the edge of desperation in the girl's voice, the exhaustion that came from trying to be everything to everyone. She reached out and squeezed Emma's hand. You are not failing anyone, she said firmly. You have been doing the work of 3 people. Now there are 2 of us, and we will figure it out together, all right? Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back and squeezed Sarah's hand in return. All right, she said, her voice steadier. All right. They spent the rest of the afternoon working together in the kitchen, Emma teaching Sarah where everything was kept and how the household ran. Sarah's shoulder ached from the activity, but she pushed through it, determined to prove she could handle the work. They prepared a large meal for the ranch hands, thick steaks and potatoes and fresh bread, with dried apple pie for dessert. When the dinner bell rang, the men came in from their work, dusty and tired but good-humored. They filed into the large dining room off the kitchen, taking seats at the long plank table. Cole came in last, his shirt damp with sweat and his hands freshly washed. His eyes sought Sarah immediately, and she saw the question in them. She smiled at him across the room, wanting him to know she was managing fine, that his faith in her was not misplaced. Relief crossed his face, followed by something warmer that made her pulse quicken. The meal was loud and cheerful, the men clearly appreciating the good food and the presence of another woman in the house. Most of them were polite, thanking Sarah and Emma for the meal and complimenting the cooking. Pete Donovan, a barrel-chested man with a perpetual smirk, made a few comments that edged toward inappropriate, but a sharp look from Cole shut him down before Sarah had to respond. After the men returned to their work and the dishes were washed, Sarah stood on the front porch watching the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Her shoulder throbbed, and her legs felt shaky from the long day, but she also felt something she had not experienced in months. Purpose. You did well today. Cole's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him leaning against the porch rail, his hat in his hands. Emma looks happier than I have seen her in a year. She is a sweet girl, Sarah said, just overwhelmed. I think having someone to share the burden will make all the difference. And you? Cole asked, moving closer. How are you holding up? You look tired at dinner. I am tired, Sarah admitted. But it is good tired, if that makes sense, the kind that comes from honest work, not from worry and grief. Cole nodded slowly. It makes sense, he said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I'm glad you came. Glad you're here. You said that before, Sarah said softly, meeting his eyes. On the way here? I know. Cole's gaze held hers, intense and searching. I meant it then. I mean it now. Something passed between them in the fading light, a recognition that went beyond gratitude or simple friendship. Sarah felt it settle into her bones, both thrilling and terrifying. She barely knew this man, yet he had shown her more kindness than anyone in her life. He had saved her, protected her, given her a chance at a new beginning, all without asking for anything in return. And now, standing here in the golden evening light, she realized she wanted to know everything about him, wanted to understand what made him the kind of man who stopped for a bleeding stranger in the street. Cole, she began. Not sure what she wanted to say, but he shook his head gently. You do not have to say anything, he said. I just wanted you to know. He settled his hat back on his head and stepped off the porch. Get some rest, Sarah. Tomorrow will be another long day. She watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, his silhouette dark against the burning sky, and felt something shift irrevocably in her heart. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Sarah rose before dawn to start breakfast for the household and the hands working alongside Emma to prepare enough food for hungry working men. After the morning meal was cleared, they would tackle the day's tasks together, washing and mending, cleaning and organizing, working through the ranch accounts that Emma found so daunting. Sarah discovered she had a talent for the bookkeeping, her father's patient teaching paying dividends as she sorted through months of disorganized ledgers. She set up a proper system for tracking expenses and income, noting which cattle buyers paid promptly and which needed reminding, recording the cost of supplies against the ranch's earnings. Robert Rutherford looked over her work one evening and nodded with satisfaction. This is exactly what we needed, he said, running a weathered finger down a column of neat figures. You have a good head for this, Miss Mitchell. Please, call me Sarah, she said, and thank you. My father believed education was important even for daughters. He was a wise man, Robert said. I wish more people thought like that. Emma is smart as a whip, but nobody ever taught her to see it in herself. As the days passed, Sarah grew stronger. Her shoulder healed cleanly, the pain fading to a dull reminder only when she overworked it. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the endless cycle of work that kept a cattle operation running. She learned which hands liked their coffee black and which preferred it with sugar, which ones told jokes at breakfast and which ones stayed quiet. She learned that Emma dreamed of opening a dress shop someday, that Jack Rutherford had a beautiful singing voice he only used when he thought no one was listening, that Robert still grieved his wife with a quiet, dignified sadness that made Sarah's heart ache. And she learned about Cole Harrison in 100 small ways. She learned that he was always the first one up in the morning and the last one to bed at night, that he had a gift with difficult horses that bordered on magical, that the other hands looked to him for guidance even though he was not officially the foreman. She learned that he loved books and borrowed them from Robert's small library, reading by lamplight in the bunkhouse when his work was done. She learned that he sent half his wages back to his sister in Tennessee, supporting her and her children after her husband died in a mining accident. She learned that he always made sure she ate enough at meals, that he found reasons to check on her during the day, that his eyes followed her across rooms in a way that made her skin prickle with awareness. And she learned that her heart beat faster every time he smiled at her, every time his hand brushed hers in passing, every time she heard his voice calling her name. They fell into a pattern of evening conversations on the porch after the work was done, sitting together watching the stars emerge over the prairie. Cole would talk about the horses he was training, the condition of the herd, the plans for the fall roundup. Sarah would share news from her letters from her aunt in California, funny stories about Emma's attempts at cooking experiments, observations about ranch life that made him laugh. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, simply existing together in the peaceful darkness. Those moments felt as intimate as any words they might have spoken, a shared understanding that grew deeper with each passing day. One evening in early October, after a day spent helping with the autumn branding, Sarah sat on the porch steps rubbing her sore hands. The work had been hard and dusty, the cattle restless, and the air thick with smoke from the branding fires. But there had been something exhilarating about it too, about being part of the essential work of the ranch, about contributing in a tangible way. Cole settled beside her close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cool evening air. He took one of her hands in his, examining the blisters that had formed despite her gloves. "You should not have worked so hard today, sir," he said, his voice gruff with concern. "Your hands are not used to that kind of work." "They will get used to it," Sarah said, oddly reluctant to pull away from his touch. His calloused fingers were gentle as they traced the edges of the blisters, his concern tangible. "You do not have to prove anything," Cole said, looking up to meet her eyes. "Everyone knows you pull your weight around here." "I am not trying to prove anything," Sarah said, then paused and reconsidered. "Or maybe I am. Maybe I'm trying to prove to myself that I can do this, that I can belong here." "You already belong here," Cole said quietly. "You have from the start. You must know that." Sarah's breath caught at the intensity in his voice, at the way he was looking at her like she was something precious. "Cole," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for, but needing something she could not name. He lifted his free hand and cupped her cheek, his palm rough and warm against her skin. "I was not looking for this, Irem," he said, his voice low and raw with honesty. "When I picked you up off that street in Dodge, I just wanted to help you. I never expected to feel this way." "What way?" Sarah asked, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Like I cannot breathe right when you are not nearby," Cole said. "Like the best part of my day is when I see you smile. Like I want to spend every evening for the rest of my life sitting on this porch talking to you about nothing and everything." He paused, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I am falling in love with you, Sarah. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you lying in that street, too stubborn to give up even when you were bleeding out in the dust." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. She covered his hand with hers, pressing it more firmly against her face. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude, that I was confusing kindness with something deeper. But it is not that. It is you. The way you see people, the way you care without making a show of it, the way you make me feel safe and brave at the same time." Cole made a sound low in his throat and leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer you," he said. "A cowboy's wages, a shared room in a bunkhouse, a future that is more hope than certainty. You deserve better than that." "You saved my life," Sarah said fiercely, pulling back just enough to look him in the eyes. "You gave me back myself when I thought I had lost everything. How can you think you do not have anything to offer me?" She shook her head, her voice turning softer. "I do not need wealth or certainty. Cole, I just need you. I need this, what we have been building together. That is worth more than all the money that was stolen from me." Cole's eyes darkened with emotion, and he closed the distance between them, capturing her lips in a kiss that was both tender and fierce. Sarah melted into it, into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck as his circled her waist. The kiss tasted of hope and promise, of all the loneliness and loss they had both carried, transforming into something new and precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers again. "Stay with me," he said, echoing the words he had spoken in Dodge City. Not just here at the ranch, but with me, for real, forever. Yes, Sarah whispered, joy bubbling up in her chest. Yes, I will stay with you. They sat together on the porch steps long into the night, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. Cole told her about his dream of owning a small ranch someday, a place where he could raise horses and build something lasting. Sarah shared her own dreams, the ones she had buried when her father died, about having a real home again, about children and stability and belonging somewhere. "We can do it together," Cole said, his arms tight around her as she leaned against his chest. "It will take time, years probably, but we can save money, maybe buy some land nearby, start small, and build from there." "Together," Sarah repeated, loving the sound of the word. "I like that." The next morning at breakfast, they shared their news with the household. Emma squealed with delight and hugged Sarah so hard she nearly knocked her over. Robert shook Cole's hand with a smile that made him look 10 years younger. "About time you two figured it out," he said gruffly. "The whole ranch has been watching you dance around each other for weeks." He clapped Cole on the shoulder. "You have my blessing and my congratulations. Sarah is a fine woman, and you are a lucky man." "I know," Cole said, his eyes finding Sarah across the room. "Believe me, I know." The other hands offered their congratulations as well, most of them genuine, a few a bit envious. Pete Donovan made a crude joke about Cole's luck that earned him a sharp rebuke from Jack Rutherford and a warning glare from Cole himself. But nothing could dampen Sarah's happiness, the pure joy of knowing she was loved and chosen and wanted. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Dodge City with the Rutherford family and the ranch hands in attendance. Sarah wore a dress that Emma helped her sew from blue cotton that matched her eyes, with lace trim they had ordered specially from the general store. Cole wore his best clothes, his dark hair neatly combed and his boots polished to a shine. He looked impossibly handsome standing at the altar waiting for her, his green eyes bright with emotion as she walked down the aisle, on Robert Rutherford's arm. The ceremony was brief, the preacher's words simple but meaningful. When Cole slipped the thin gold band on Sarah's finger, his hands were steady and sure. When he kissed her to seal their vows, it was tender and reverent, a promise of all the days to come. The celebration afterward at the ranch was loud and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Emma had outdone herself with the cooking, and someone produced a fiddle that filled the evening air with bright, lively tunes. Sarah danced until her feet ached, passed from partner to partner among the hands, but always returning to Cole, to the circle of his arms and the warmth of his smile. As the party wound down and the stars emerged overhead, Cole led Sarah away from the noise and laughter to the small cabin that Robert had helped them prepare. It was just one room with a loft, simple but clean, with a good stove and sturdy furniture and windows that looked out over the prairie. But it was theirs, a home they would share as husband and wife, and Sarah thought it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. Cole carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and set her down gently in the middle of the room. Then his expression turned serious, his hands framing her face as he looked at her with so much love it made her chest ache. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he said quietly. "Making sure you know you are loved and valued and cherished. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Sarah. You gave me something to live for beyond just getting through each day." Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. "I could never regret this, Shaisene," she said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Cole Harrison, and I promise to spend my life showing you that." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that was both thrilling and profound. Cole was gentle with her inexperience, patient and careful, his touch reverent as he helped her navigate the intimacy of marriage. Sarah had been nervous, uncertain what to expect, but Cole made it easy, made it beautiful, his love for her evident in every kiss and caress. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Sarah's head on Cole's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and feel the rise and fall of his breathing. Outside, the prairie stretched away into darkness, vast and wild and free. But here, in this small cabin in the arms of her husband, Sarah had never felt safer or more at home. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Cole replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Always." The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of work and joy and the slow, steady building of a life together. Sarah continued to help Emma with the household and the books, while Cole worked the ranch and slowly accumulated the skills and capital they would need for their own place someday. They saved every penny they could spare, keeping their money in a tin box hidden under the floorboards of their cabin, watching it grow with satisfaction. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small adjustments of two people becoming one unit. Sarah learned that Cole was grumpy before his morning coffee, but sweet and affectionate in the evenings. Cole learned that Sarah sang to herself when she was happy and went quiet when she was worried. They had their disagreements, as any couple does, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they always talked through them, always came back to the foundation of love and respect they had built. In the spring, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, placing his hand over her still flat stomach and watching wonder dawn across his face. "A baby?" he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "We are going to have a baby?" "Yes," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "In the fall, the doctor thinks, September or October." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "I cannot believe it," he said, his voice muffled. "I cannot believe I get to have you and a child. I do not deserve this much happiness." "You deserve everything," Sarah said fiercely, pulling back to look at him. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Cole Harrison, and I am going to spend my life making sure you know that." Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1879, exactly 1 year and 2 months after Sarah had been shot in the streets of Dodge City. The labor was long and difficult, but Emma and the doctor from town saw her through it. And when Cole was finally allowed into the room, he found Sarah exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly, her voice hoarse from hours of effort. Cole approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby's eyes were closed, his tiny fists curled against his chest, and Cole felt something shift fundamentally in his heart, an expansion of love he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," he breathed, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the downy dark hair on the baby's head. "You are perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for this." They named him Thomas, after Sarah's father, with Robert as his middle name to honor the man who had given them both a chance. Little Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's green eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. Cole was a devoted father from the start, helping with nighttime feedings and diaper changes without complaint, singing lullabies in his rough voice when the baby fussed. Watching Cole with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed, made Sarah fall in love with him all over again. He was everything she had never known to hope for in a husband, a true partner in every sense of the word. 2 years later, when Thomas was toddling around the ranch getting into everything, they welcomed a daughter. Elizabeth was born on a warm May morning, arriving quickly and with much less drama than her brother. She had Sarah's blue eyes and golden hair, and from the moment Cole held her, she had him completely wrapped around her tiny finger. "I am in trouble now," he said, gazing down at his daughter with besotted wonder. "How am I supposed to say no to this face?" "You will figure it out," Sarah said, laughing at his expression. or she will run roughshod over all of us. By the time Thomas was 5 and Elizabeth 3, Cole and Sarah had saved enough money to make their dream a reality. Robert helped them find a good piece of land about 5 miles from the Double R, 200 acres with water and good grass and a small cabin that needed work but had solid bones. It was not much by some standards, but to Cole and Sarah it felt like a kingdom. They named it the Harrison Ranch, though Cole joked they should call it the Second Chance Ranch, since that was what it represented for both of them. With help from the hands at the Double R and long days of backbreaking work, they slowly built their operation. Cole started with a small herd of horses, using the skills he had spent years developing to train mounts for local ranchers and the army post. Sarah managed their accounts and raised their children and kept their home running smoothly. It was hard work, harder than anything they had done before, with lean times and setbacks and moments of doubt, but they faced it all together, supporting each other through difficulties and celebrating victories. And slowly, steadily, the Harrison Ranch began to thrive. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Cole took Sarah up to a small rise overlooking their property at sunset. Thomas and Elizabeth were with Emma for the evening, giving them a rare moment alone. They stood together looking out over the land they had built, the cabin with its new addition, the barn and corrals, the horses grazing peacefully in the pasture. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in Dodge City?" Cole asked, his arm around Sarah's waist. "When I told you I had found you a job?" Sarah leaned into him, thinking back to that difficult time that felt like a lifetime ago. "I said I could not pay you back," she said slowly, "that it would take me months to save enough for what you had spent on me." "And what did I say?" Cole prompted, turning to look at her. Sarah met his eyes, seeing all the love and joy and partnership they had built together reflected there. "You said you never asked me to," she said softly. "You said to just stay with you." "Best decision I ever made," Cole said, pulling her closer, "asking you to stay, falling in love with you, building this life together." He gestured at the vista before them. "None of this would exist without you, Sarah. You are the heart of everything we have built." "We built it together," Sarah corrected, her voice thick with emotion. "That is what makes it beautiful. We took 2 broken people with nothing but each other and made something real and lasting. We made a home. We made a family. We made a life worth living." Cole kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was sinking below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied, and they could hear the faint sound of their children laughing at the Rutherford place. "I love you," Cole said simply. "Today and always." "I love you too," Sarah replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Forever." They stood together watching the light fade from the sky, 2 souls who had found each other against impossible odds, who had chosen each other every day since. What had started with a gunshot and a stranger's kindness had become something profound and lasting, a love story written across the harsh beauty of the Kansas prairie. And as the first stars emerged overhead, casting their ancient light down on the land below, Sarah thought about that desperate girl bleeding in the dirt, alone and afraid, thinking her story was over. She thought about how wrong she had been, how that moment had actually been the beginning of everything that mattered. She thought about the cowboy who had picked her up and carried her to safety, who had seen something in her worth saving when she could not see it herself. She thought about all the ways they had saved each other since then, in large gestures and small moments, in quiet support and fierce protection, in the daily choice to build something beautiful together. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice again every day for the rest of her life. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did, who could sit for hours watching Cole work with a difficult animal, absorbing every lesson. Elizabeth was her mother's daughter, clever with numbers and words, already helping Sarah with the ranch accounts by the time she was 7. A 3rd child joined them when Elizabeth was 4, another son they named James, who proved to be the wildest of the bunch, always getting into trouble and charming his way out of it again. The Harrison Ranch continued to grow, gaining a reputation for quality horses throughout Kansas. Cole's patient training methods produced mounts that were reliable and steady, perfect for ranch work or family riding. Sarah's careful management kept them solvent even in difficult years, her books always balanced and her planning always smart. They remained close with the Rutherfords, the two families intertwined in all the important ways. Emma eventually did open her dress shop in Dodge City, marrying the local banker's son and raising 4 daughters who kept her busy and happy. Jack took over running the Double R when Robert's health began to fail, proving to be as capable and fair as his father. Robert lived long enough to see his grandchildren born and to know that the ranch he had built would continue on strong. On Sarah's 35th birthday, celebrated with family and friends at the Harrison Ranch, Cole gave her a gift that made her cry. It was a leather-bound journal, beautifully tooled, with their story written inside in his careful hand. He had been working on it for months, recording everything he could remember from that day in Dodge City forward, all the moments big and small that had brought them to where they were. "I never want us to forget," he said as she paged through it, tears streaming down her face. "Never want our children to forget where we came from, what we overcame. I want them to know that love can happen in the strangest ways, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best things." Sarah hugged him tight, the journal pressed between them. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you." That night, after the celebration had ended and the children were asleep, they sat together on the porch of their house, now a proper 2-story structure with 6 bedrooms and a wide wraparound porch. The original cabin stood nearby, converted into a guest house and overflow space. The barn and corrals had expanded to handle their growing operation. The Harrison Ranch was a success by any measure, prosperous and respected. But the real measure of their success was in the peace that filled Sarah as she sat beside her husband, their hands linked together, watching the familiar stars emerge overhead. It was in the sound of their children's breathing from inside the house, safe and loved and secure. It was in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more work and more challenges, but they would face them together, as they always had. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that robber had not shot me?" Sarah asked quietly. "If I had made it to California like I planned?" Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that I believe we would have found each other somehow, maybe not that way, maybe not that day. But somewhere, sometime, I believe our paths would have crossed. Some things are just meant to be." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "You are a romantic, Cole Harrison." "Only with you," he said, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "Only ever with you." They sat together in comfortable silence, bound by years of shared experience and deep, abiding love. Sarah thought about the girl she had been, desperate and alone, and the woman she had become, strong and confident and secure. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, how pain and loss had somehow transformed into joy and purpose. She thought about the cowboy who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it fully. And she thought about the words that had changed everything, the simple request that had become the foundation of their entire world together. "Just stay with me." She had stayed. Through hard times and good times, through joy and sorrow, through all the mundane moments and profound ones that make up a life, she had stayed, and in staying, had found everything she had never known to want. "Cole," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "Yes?" "I am glad I stayed." He turned to look at her, his green eyes reflecting the starlight, and smiled the smile that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years. "I am glad you stayed too," he said. "Every single day. I am grateful you stayed." They remained on the porch long into the night, talking and laughing and planning, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Two souls who had found each other in the dust and blood of a Kansas street, who had chosen each other against all logic and built something beautiful from nothing. And as the night deepened and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of horses and home, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not in California with her aunt, not back in Missouri clinging to the past, but here, in this place, with this man, living a life she had never imagined but could not now picture ending. The story that had begun with a gunshot and a stranger's kindness had become a legacy of love and partnership that would echo through generations. Their children would grow up knowing the value of compassion, the power of second chances, the importance of choosing love even when it seems impossible. They would tell their own children about the grandmother who was saved by a cowboy's kindness, about the grandfather who saw worth in a bleeding stranger, about the love that grew from tragedy into something strong and lasting. And years from now, when Cole and Sarah were old and gray, sitting on the same porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, they would still remember that moment in Dodge City with crystal clarity. They would still feel the echo of fear and pain transforming into hope and possibility. They would still be grateful for the robber's bullet that had brought them together, even as they mourned the violence that had made it necessary. But mostly, they would remember the words that had changed everything, the simple promise that had become their entire world. I never asked you to. Just stay with me. And she had stayed, building a life more beautiful than any she had dared to dream, loving a man who had shown her what it meant to be truly seen and valued. She had stayed, and in staying had found her home.